Rev up your engines!
Well, here comes the result of the corruption with Fiat Chrysler and the unions. Tuesday, the federal government says they have to pay a $30 million fine, which actually isn't that much for a gigantic corporation like that. As usual, they're giving them a little slap on the wrist. Fiat Chrysler America, which is now part of Stellantis, is on a 3-year probation. I didn't know companies could be on probation like people, you know? Well, theoretically, corporations are individuals, so I guess you can put them on probation. And it doesn't have to pay restitution either. It's ridiculous what they let these corporations get away with. Now they employ tens of thousands of people, Fiat Chrysler America, and that the severity of this case is unmatched. The district attorney that went after them got them to admit it was a felony, and then they give them a little slap on the wrist. Of course, the company tried to say, there's bad apples. These are bad actors. It wasn't our whole plan. It was just some bad guys. They're always blaming it on the little guys, right? You know how that always goes. They said rogue individuals did it. Yeah, what a load of BS. They didn't go after Marchione, who was the head of it, because he's dead. That's how long these cases take, right? And they said, well, we don't go after dead people, right? So what's the point? There's no point at all. But they admitted that they were bad. Oh, you were bad. Slap you on the wrist. Now, what they did was they paid off union officials, meals, parties. They even paid a $262,000 mortgage for a former officer in the UAW who was vice president in charge of the union's Chrysler department. Really corrupt stuff here. They admitted they did wrong and will put them on probation for 3 years. Yeah, whoever said there was justice for the rich? They get everything, right? You look at the money they're taking, a little fine like that. No one ever follows this up. I'd like to see, did they actually pay this fine in money? Or is it like when Volkswagen got caught in the United States with the emissions scandal? They cut a deal where they're going to open up electric charging stations, which are for profit. So Volkswagen's investing into that. It's not like they gave the government the money. Nobody ever follows up with, where's this $30 million? What happens to it? I wish somebody would, because I'd like to see what actually happens with this. After the bureaucrats get done blah, 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 and kissing each other's rear ends about how great they are. If they beat probation, does Fiat Chrysler go to jail like a person would? They're individuals, right? Well, that chip shortage is sort of the gift that never stops giving. It's even hit Toyota again. Toyota's now slashing their September output due to the chip shortage. They're planning on making almost 900,000 cars in September. Now they say they're only going to be able to make 500,000 due to the chip shortage. They have to slow down production and North America, China, and Europe. They also say the surge in the COVID-19 made their production lines slow down. They're getting shortage of lots of different stuff because the people aren't building the parts that they give to them. And to put it in perspective, they're starting to come back last September where they made 840,000 cars. And now they said they're only going to be able to make 500,000. So that definitely is a step backwards. They're going to be making a lot less. So if you think about it, not a good time to buy a car. They're making less. They're going to jack the prices up like everybody else does. You got a nice car. Maybe even an older car that still runs okay. Hey, watch my videos. Ask me questions. I'll help you maintain your cars to keep them running as long as possible. So you don't have to pay some outrageous price for a car because there's not enough out for sale and the price goes up. In real estate, they say they're not making any more seashore, so land by the ocean is worth a lot of money. Well, now they say, well, they're not making enough cars. There's hardly anybody out there, so they're going for lots of money. So if you don't have to, don't buy now. Well, Carvana, their stock's up. They're selling all these cars. Well, North Carolina recently shut down a Carvana operation, where the cars and the vending machine, that gimmick that they have going. It was in Wake County, and they closed it for 6 months because the guy was doing fast deals. Here's some of the things the guy did. They failed to deliver titles to the Department of Motor Vehicles. They sold motor vehicles without a state inspection and issued out-of-state temporary tags and plates for vehicles sold to customers in North Carolina. They'd broken all kinds of rules. I'm sure they probably broke all other kinds of rules, but these are the ones they got caught with. That's always the problem. If somebody gets big, it gets corrupt. They just keep pumping it out. Keep pumping it out. That's how that stuff always goes. If you remember that big oil explosion they had years ago off the coast in the Gulf, it burnt for months. They said, how could this happen? Well, because they were produce oil. And they say, so there's a problem. No, just keep running it, full blast, and then boof. People are under too much pressure to make money, and then the rules start to slide by. They just keep rolling stuff out. Things get too big, they get out of control. The idea that you're buying your car in a vending machine like a gumball, I mean, what kind of a business model is that? They buy them, they sell them, they whip them through. This guy in North Carolina, hey, I've had people deal with some of these places and they had a hard time getting a title. It's like these people got shut down for. They got vehicles that weren't all that great. They don't know what's coming in, what's going out. It's kind of like a giant meat grinder. They get them as fast as they can, they sell them out as fast as they can. You're not going to get any kind of personalized anything. Here's our price. This is the grade price. Here it is. And it's always higher than what everybody else is asking because it's a convenient factor. It just shows the bigger things get, maybe not such a great idea for the consumer. Jake the Snack says, I have antifreeze pouring out of the spark plug holes in my GM. What's going on? There's only really two things that can do that. Pray that somehow your intake manifold gasket is bad and the water's coming out of the intake manifold around the spark plug holes and filling them up with coolant. That isn't too bad. You take off the intake manifold to put a new gasket in. Let's say you're talking about you take the spark plug out of your engine and there's coolant coming out there. That's inside the engine. At a minimum, your head gasket's blown, the heads could be warped, lots of things could be wrong. What you basically want to do, have the system pressure tested. Mechanics, and if you want to buy one, you can get one for $80. Get a pressure tester that pumps up. And then pray you see it leaking out on the top when the spark plug's screwed in, and that'd mean that your intake manifold gasket's probably gone. Now, if it's got that crappy old plastic intake manifold, it could actually be cracked. And when you took it off, you'd have to see if it was cracked, you'd have to replace the manifold and the gasket. But pressure testing will show you what it is. Pray it's the intake manifold gasket and not inside the engine. That would cost a fortune to rebuild. Phoenix says, I got an OT Ford Explorer. The oil light comes on and the oil needle pressure drops to low. It happens a few seconds. Everything goes back to normal. It repeats during driving. The oil is not low. Help. When that oil pressure light comes on and the pressure goes low, listen to the engine. If it starts clacking, don't drive it anymore. You have actual low oil pressure, it will destroy the engine. Could be the oil pump, could be bearings are worn that make bigger space. You have to rebuild the engine. Lots of bad things. If it sounds totally normal, 99% of the time that's just a bad oil pressure sending unit. It gives the data to the gauge, and if it's breaking, it'll make it drop down because the oil pressure sending unit that tells how much pressure is in the engine is broken. They're just simple devices, diaphragm and a spring inside. They can leak, they can break internally, and not give the right data to the engine. Or the wire that plugs onto them. A lot of times that'll get corroded, gets a bad connection, it'll do it. Or maybe the wire's just flat loose, and you can tighten it up. You can take it off, clean it, squash it with a pair of pliers so it's small again, and then push it back on. Pray it's that. But it's generally 90-something% of the time, that's all that it is. It's the sensor itself. Most of them are pretty easy to get to. They're not that big of a deal to change. Now, you may not have heard of the Chinese tech giant Baidu, but they just launched a new chip for artificial intelligence, a Robo car that they're planning to use as robotic taxis. Like many tech companies, they want to expand out of what they're doing. They want to get into bigger things. They want to go from software, advertising business they're in, to artificial intelligence and driverless cars. Now, this company is China's biggest search engine player, so it's a huge company. And of course, the advertising market has been hard in China during this coronavirus stuff, so they decided they got a new semiconductor they got coming out, and they want to make robotic self-driving taxis. Now, their chip unit is valued at $2 billion, this new chip that they got out. They also took the wraps off a Robo car that they're planning to use as taxis. This particular one is a prototype, gull-wing doors and stuff. Now, this company Baidu is more than just, oh, we're going to do this. They have been running robo-taxi services in limited areas of China already, in Guangzhou and Beijing, where they can hail an autonomous taxi using their Apollo Go app. Now, it's in limited areas, but it actually does exist now. So you want to see the future? Maybe take a trip to China. And they say that they're going to have that robo-taxis ready in a couple of years for a bunch of places in China. They want to commercialize a robo-taxi service across China. If they succeed, they'll be the first country to actually do it en masse. I figured that this electric self-driving stuff, hey, if any place is going to be first, it's going to be China. It's a communist country. They can say, hey, we're going to do this, and they'll do it. They can say, we're going to have lanes just for the robo-taxis, and they'll do it. The reason they're in delimited areas now is because the system is setting itself up in a smaller area. It knows exactly where everything is, and of course, if they're on their own road, then they're not going to have to deal with humans going in and out, driving all over the place, which would really be a mess in China, because I read a thing the other day about drivers in China. When they're busy sometimes, they just go on the sidewalk and they start beeping and get out of my way. anyway, so you want to make an area where there aren't people driving if you're going to have a robo-taxi. So they've already been trying it out. Who knows? Maybe this company will make a massive push into robo-taxis. But like I said, it's probably going to be in their own little area. It's not going to be wide open. They're starting in certain parts, and they're going to go from there, which kind of makes sense. I mean, you don't take a taxi for an 800-mile trip, but if you're in a city, taxis make more sense. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.